All right, meeting will come to order. Please rise and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, the agenda. Anyone have any additions or changes to the agenda?
Nothing.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Agenda approved. We have minutes from the previous meeting. Any questions, additions, corrections?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it, they look good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes approved. Okay, public comment. Anyone from the public? Yes, sir.
Brian Van Gorp, Yucatan Township. This is not a sour grape speech. We knew in advance that given the choice between enforcing the ordinance or showing favoritism to Erickson's, you would choose the Ericksons. You have been perfectly consistent in that for 5 years. This has been one more hurdle on a path towards holding you accountable, and we will. You apparently do not understand that when you deny people justice and treat them with disrespect, you only make them more determined. This board has consistently treated us as if we were ignorant. You have never even acknowledged there has been an issue, even when the court said there was. Because so much deference is given to local government, you have been able to get away with your abuse. Mr. Squires exploits this legal trick very effectively. That doesn't make it right. Winning is different than being right. In this county, the zoning department has proven to be guilty of discrimination and intimidation. The Board of Adjustments not only was proven wrong, but was so embarrassing that it had to be replaced. The Planning Commission has proven to have made a mistake in the Erickson permit renewal according to the court. So all of these pieces of county government have been proven to be discriminatory and have made unjust decisions. But ultimately this comes back to this board, because this board is responsible for oversight. When all this finally came back to you and you had a chance to correct the injustices, you failed again. Many pieces of this county's government are in the process of being reformed and improved, although they are still inadequate. The zoning administrator has been replaced by someone better, but who still lacks the courage to enforce the ordinance. The Board of Adjustments has been restructured. The Planning Commission has term limits and has mostly been replaced. Has this board taken the initiative on any of this? No, it has not. A handful of citizens have done all the hard work. Why are you as elected officials being paid when all you seem capable of is enabling incompetence while a handful of citizens are forced to do your work? On top of that, you resist reform at every opportunity. There are certain expectations of elected officials. Teresa, Scott, Fred, I'm talking to you. And past board members Judy and Steve. We expect competence, courage to stand up for what is right, and that all constituents are treated equally. You have been a shameful disappointment. Your lack of accountability has stolen something very important from the citizens of this county. For democracy to work, we must believe government can function properly with citizen engagement. You have stolen that belief. We have to get outside this county to get any justice. No justice, no peace. Let the storm continue. We'll be back. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Michael Fields, Yucatan Township. In the wake of the really terrible and unjust decision about the Erickson mine, I got to thinking about the unofficial county policy of relying on citizen complaints because the environmental services just doesn't have the staff to, be patrolling all the mines and making sure everyone's in compliance. I've heard Rick Frank himself say on more than one occasion that they do rely on citizen complaints when mines or feedlots go out of bounds. And so I started thinking about the recent history of citizen complaints and how they've worked out so far. My wife and I own a farm next to a mine that's been operating for years without a permit, and then when they finally encroached halfway into our setback, we turned to the county for help. We lodged one of those citizen complaints. Well, that's ended up being a 3-year story with the county dragging us all the way to the state Supreme Court on a technicality just to punish us, shut us up, spend us down, use us as probably some sort of example to anyone else who would dare complain about, someone violating their property rights, basically is what happened here. And then I was thinking, then there's Mrs. Schrader and her son, both had cracked plaster due to blasting at the Cruco mine next to where they border. One house is old plaster. The other house was brand new plaster. They both cracked at the same time on the same day. Yet the county bent over backwards to give the mining operation the benefit of the doubt. There was some charade about calling in some blasting expert from Chicago to prove that, no, you didn't see the walls cracking in your house when you thought you did. Then there are the Van Gorps, Bakers, and Iversons.
Michael, I don't know how long
You've known all about that, okay? Then the city of Houston. I mean, I started thinking, what's the difference here? Is it that the land use operation generates a profit? Is that it? And that's why the county sides with them? Well, I'm thinking, I have a farm. It grows soybeans and corn. It generates a profit too. So that can't be the answer. Maybe the answer is it has to generate a certain amount of money. So maybe the board should have a meeting one day to determine exactly how much money a property has to generate in order to become immune from our zoning ordinance. So obviously there's some sort of means testing here. And has the county taken this position of siding with the money generating properties because they fear the deep pockets that would allow these entities to hire lawyers? Is the county being held hostage by the mere threat of lawsuits? Has the county made the determination that people who live next to mines and feedlots and that sort of thing are pretty much, living in a sacrifice zone? We will sacrifice this small number of citizens who just happen to be unlucky enough to live next to a mine or something like that in order to maybe not be sued. So, that's inherently undemocratic. And also, maybe during your meeting you could explore the morality of that position, because it is really amoral. I mean, do you guys have the guts to stand up and do the right thing for once? are certain citizens just to be sacrificed so that Sam doesn't have to do any extra work and the taxpayers might save 10 cents each on their next tax bill? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
One more.
Quickly, please.
I didn't come to criticize you, by the way.
You-
My
you-
name is Lorraine
Okay.
Culver, and I am from the city of Houston. My own professional expertise is that I do have a doctor's degree in psychology, which doesn't mean I'm an expert even in that. But I want to talk to you about your psychology. You may or may not recall that I spoke about the two laws in this county, the laws of ordinances and so on, and the law of expectation for private property rights that goes back into ancient history. And I suspect that all of you share in both of those laws, including the one of respect for private property rights. And I think that affects you in a couple ways. One, when you make decisions here, you don't want your neighbors to get mad at you. And second, you own property as well that you wish to control. So that's a part of the landscape of your decision making. And I might as well say right now that what I'm heading towards is courage. I understand that there is something of a preference for compromise among some of the people on the boards. And we like to be able to compromise and not have knock down, drag out disagreements, whether they're verbal or otherwise. But think of it this way. You have a small child, you're standing next to a road with heavy traffic, and he wants to run across the road. Do you compromise and say, honey, just go into the first lane? No. Compromise is not appropriate there, is it? We wait till the traffic is cleared, if it ever does. I would also like to tell you, based on what I've claimed is something of a specific knowledge, psychology, when somebody does something, if it gets a positive reinforcement, meaning the result they want or it pleases them, that solidifies their expectation of doing that again. If you give them a negative reinforcement, and then you go back and give a positive, and you flip back and forth, it's even harder to get them to change their behavior, because they think, well, if I try again, I might get it. So intermittent reinforcement of transgressing the law or ignoring the law or ignoring your neighbor's rights, they get away with it a lot of the time, maybe not all of the time. You can believe they're going to continue to try to get away with it. So what I'm asking for from you is courage. I think most of you saw the inequity and saw the need to enforce laws. There were some who wanted to move up gradually on it. There's some that weren't wanting to face it down at all. But what you need is courage to implement the laws. And you may need to go ahead and design a way to implement the laws. And I don't necessarily mean gradually, but you need to have depend on more than citizen complaint. You need to find a way to see what's going on. And then you have to implement that way that you design. That's enforcement. And I think you have a tough job, and I'm really suggesting that you stiffen your spines and take courage and do what you've been elected to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Olivia?
Morning, Commissioners.
Good morning, Sheriff.
I'll just introduce Olivia real briefly, just because we haven't had the opportunity to be over here yet. This is our new Emergency Management Director, Olivia Naide. She comes from the Stearns County area.
Oh, it's Sherburne County, we're right next door.
So I'll just give her a few moments to just give you a brief description of herself, and we'll move on.
Well, like I said, from Sherburne County, from Becker, Minnesota. I went to school at North Dakota State University in Fargo for emergency management. I've been really passionate about the subject for a long time, especially in rural communities and how they can respond and recover from potential situations like you guys had in '07. I've been here for 3 weeks now. I just moved to Caledonia, so I am going to be local here. I've been doing a few things. My biggest thing is I've been introducing myself to people and getting out there, meeting first responders and other people like that. I've also been setting up meetings with the cities. There's a hazard mitigation plan that needs to be approved by them. You guys approved it in February, so I just need to meet with the cities as well and do that. I've also been signing up for some conferences, trainings, and workshops to get the certification for the state. And then right now I'm working on a grant with the Sheriff's Office to secure some equipment for the Sheriff's Posse. So I've been doing a few different things already, and it's been a lot of fun so far, and everybody's been really welcoming. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to work with you guys.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome.
Yes.
Thanks, Olivia.
Thank you.
Sheriff, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I had added an agenda item based on the Mountain Prairie thing.
I saw that as I was reading through the agenda,
Yeah.
yes.
Do you mind if we just review where the ball, what happened so it doesn't again?
What happens, what?
What happened here so that it doesn't happen again? Or
We definitely need to make sure that that doesn't occur,
Yeah,
yes.
because I have to admit I was not up to speed on the whole process, and we were in the midst of a transition.
Yes.
And I don't know if Olivia's aware, but we had, one of the townships had some road damage.
Mm-hmm.
And we asked that they submit what damage they had, but somehow it missed the deadline. Do we know, do all the townships know about the deadline? Has that been something in the past that's been?
They've been through the process before. This particular deadline, I understand, is kind of a new procedure, or it's a new program, I should say, not a new
Okay.
procedure. Typically, it's FEMA reimbursement. This would have been a state reimbursement.
Okay, and is a state program, would that be full reimbursement, or I'm not familiar?
No, there's a percentage. I don't know exactly
Okay.
what that is off the top of my head without researching it.
Okay. And I didn't contact the township. They must be aware.
I talked to the township chair.
Okay. And, again, I mentioned, it's not, we're not talking hundreds of thousands, but nonetheless, it would have been nice to have anything we could reimburse, but, so, I guess, again, moving forward.
Chairman, I really don't know what we're even talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry. What happened is, the request for reimbursement for this storm damage was filed too late, and so they're not eligible. And so.
Like a washout from the last rains type of
Correct,
deal?
yeah,
Is that
The May rains, yes.
yeah.
me? Okay.
So I just wanted to try to determine what we need to do to
Well, typically, that would be the emergency manager would kind of take over that. To me, that's why the significance of that position is so important.
Okay.
So that we don't miss out on
Yeah.
opportunities like this.
Well,
Real quick, I guess I've got a little bit of confusion only for the fact that, I mean, we've gone through this in 2007, 2010. I mean, it's not anything new to apply. Why? I guess I'm curious, why did the township?
This is different than the 2007, 2010.
As far as-
there we had countywide damage, and my understanding was they were able to meet the presidential declaration requirements. This was isolated damage to basically one township. That's the only township I'm aware of that expressed
nobody
damage.
else came forward.
Oh, okay. My point was, we've had townships submit for damage before. I was just curious why this wasn't done the same. I guess, okay. But new individuals that probably didn't know the process? Okay.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it was submitted, it just wasn't, it didn't get submitted in a overly timely manner. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but
Sure.
the time was delayed, and then HSEM didn't get the information.
Is it like a 60-day or 90-day deal, or what's
It's
the?
less than that.
It was
Oh,
less
really?
than that.
Yeah.
Oh,
And that's not my intent either, to say, hey, you screwed up or you screwed up. I just want to make sure that
yeah.
we don't allow it to happen again.
Is that something that should?
Okay,
put
Olivia?
Yep, I'm writing it down.
Is that something, though, that we should just write a memo to the townships, just in case? Because, like Shar was saying, you do have turnover, that they understand that, hey, if this happens, you have this window to get it done, as a reminder.
Wait, well, maybe what, if I could lean on you right away, Olivia,
That's okay.
is maybe a review of how that whole state program and what their timelines are, so that we're completely aware of
Yeah,
what we.
it is a fairly new thing. It's only like 1 or 2 years old, which is why it's still kind of, people are still getting
Sure.
their feet on for it. So, yeah, and I plan on meeting with all officials that I can in the county, within cities, townships, to make sure that we're all on the same page as well, so.
So this is a legislative
Good.
thing that tightened down.
Yeah,
timelines.
I don't know if you guys remember, was it 2014, we had a budget surplus for the state, and that's that they created this disaster fund, so it's like a mini disaster declaration, is
Oh,
what
I
it's for.
see. I see.
Yeah, it's very new.
And they wouldn't have been guaranteed reimbursement. I mean, the director of Homeland Security has to approve the reimbursement and stuff.
Sure.
So it wasn't like they missed out on guaranteed funds.
Okay.
It was the opportunity to possibly get funds.
Yeah.
I see.
Okay, thank you both.
All right.
All right, Mr., is it Gady? Is that the correct? Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, Commissioners. First, just want to thank you for your time this morning on your agenda. I'm Bob Gady, and I'm the Risk Management Consultant for Houston County with the Minnesota Counties Intergovernmental Trust. This report we're giving Commissioners on a 2-year rotation, so we're kind of following the election cycle, wanting to get out, meet our new Commissioners, and give them an update of what's happening at the Insurance Trust. More for our new commissioners. The trust began back in the early 70s when there were some coverages that were difficult to obtain, especially workers' compensation. So it was the idea of county commissioners to begin pooling together because MCIT is a risk-sharing pool. You and 80 other counties in the state make up the joint powers of MCIT. We also have other county-related joint powers that are members. Here in Houston County, those are the local Ag Society, River SWCD, and the Family Services Collaborative. They are also members of MCIT. We talk about some of the benefits on the bottom of page 2. The one I really want to highlight is tailoring of the coverage. What the MCIT board saw was a need for enhanced coverage in the area of data compromise. So that's if there's something goes wrong, that data is leaked. You may have internal expenses, or what we call the first-party expenses, meaning you need to bring in some IT experts, you need to offer creditor monitoring. That would be covered under the first party. And then if there is a third party or a liability situation, that would also be protected. Now there's $50,000 in all of these areas. One of the areas that I know members ask a lot about is the ransomware. And that is something that will be covered under this new data compromise protection. So it's a great enhancement knowing that our members are doing more and more work these days electronically, and things are stored as data. And we know there's lots of incidences of data going on in the world. We hope it doesn't happen to you, but if it does, we do now have an enhanced coverage for that area. That was effective January 1st of this year. Looking at page 3, in property and casualty claims, we're just giving you a look here at MCIT as a whole. Under frequency, where do most of the claims come from? And that is automobile. But you have to remember there's over 9,000 vehicles protected by MCIT throughout the state of Minnesota. Whenever an automobile is damaged, that's an individual claim. So it makes sense that frequency-wise, or number of claims coming in, auto by far is the leader. Severity, or the bottom chart, represents where are the dollars being paid out. So there the chart changes quite a bit. More dollars would go out on a property claim. They tend to be larger. A fire, water damage, those type of claims tend to be bigger. Also then in the area of liability, we break it down into 3 distinct areas: the public employee, the law enforcement, and the land use. But there the dollar amount being paid out increases. There's defense costs, there's potential settlement, the claims tend to last longer, so that's where more of the dollars will be paid out. Moving on to page 4, discussing the workers' compensation, or the claims of employees injured in the workplace. Our charts really don't differ too much when it comes to number of claims versus the dollars paid out. We know where the bulk of the claims are going to come from, and it kind of goes with the territory or the amount of exposure in the job being done. Of course, sheriff jail operations, highway, if you have a healthcare facility, those are the more the areas where there is more risk potential or more chance of an injury happening. A lot of them do come from a slip and fall type of incident. You can injure an arm, an elbow, a back, a knee. That's where a lot of the claims come from. If you've seen any of the MCIT posters about people slipping and falling, and that was a campaign that MCIT started because we just wanted an awareness of how easy it is to have a slip and fall accident. Some of it being just around an office with extension cords, a lot of it coming with changing weather conditions. That's how a lot of our slip and fall type claims happen. I want to explain the bottom chart on page 4 because that is really good news for Houston County. Under workers' compensation, it really is the only coverage area where we have what's called loss rating, meaning there's a component that looks at what kind of losses did Houston County have that affects how much you need to pay for the actual workers' compensation coverage. So the important box in that chart is called the MOD. That stands for the Experience Modification Factor. That factor looks at 3 full years of experience. So that 2017 calculation is looking at the years 2015, 14, and 13. Now you see that number of 0.756, which is well below what we expect the losses to be at a 1.00. So that means that Houston County received in the area of a 25% reduction on your workers' compensation costs, and that cost difference amounted to over $32,000. So that's a good thing. And we know from years of experience that workers' compensation claims are not just good luck. It really is a reflection on looking at safety in your different departments, having an active safety committee, looking at potential exposures. If you do have an incident, reviewing that incident. What happened to cause that so it doesn't happen again. Also active with return to work, meaning once an employee is injured, it's important to, once they have approval to go back to work, get that employee back in the workplace. Whether it be light duty, whether it be part-time, it's just a real advantage in getting that claim settled, having a good return to work program. So that is good news for Houston County. Keep up the good work in that area. Let's move on to page 5. Just want to explain in the financial area a little bit. Good news with the base rates, both property casualty and work comp. And keep in mind that rates, MCIT uses an actuary every year. Those rates are provided to all of the membership, because remember, you're all in this together with 80 other counties. So those rates are the rates that are set for all members. Good news in the liability area, seeing a reduction in those Driver Privacy Protection Act claims that were a rash about 2 to 3 years ago. Many of them have been dismissed or settled, and we have reserves already in place for the claims that still exist. Members are now aware that those driver lookups, you must have a business reason to go in and look at someone's private data. Mm-hmm. Just going in on your own is a violation. Reinsurance is the safety net against large catastrophic claims. So MCIT, the organization, it takes the first $500,000 of any claim. After that, it would go on to a reinsurer. We have specific reinsurance for liability, for workers' compensation, and for property. The board did decide to make a change in the property reinsurance, moving to Hartford Fire, as they presented the trust with a 14% reduction in that premium, because MCIT does have to pay a premium every year to have that reinsurance in place. The dividends, always a popular discussion, but do remember that dividends are not guaranteed from year to year. But those those dollars are returned to the members after losses and investment are reviewed by the actuary. So it's a financially sound return to the members. But your organization, MCIT, has a track record back to 1991 of returning those dollars to the members. Last year's dividend, over $103,000. All right, we can go ahead and wrap up then. Just want to remind you of services. Loss control, Brian Dowdy continues to work with Houston County. And he works directly with Tess in HR. Houston, I know that our loss control consultant in law enforcement has met with your sheriff's office. This past year, MCIT hired another loss control consultant specifically for law enforcement. So he'll be working with the entire state of Minnesota. Risk management, that's the area I work in, so we offer coverage reviews. Any questions in the contract area from a risk management, those are the areas that I get involved with. If there's interest, MCIT does offer some training in the law enforcement area. Patrol is a training online that's available. So if there is interest, it's something that I encourage you to take a look at. You've probably heard of Sand Creek and the Employee Assistance Plan. That is also offered through MCIT. It's available to employees, officials, and all family members. Any issues that they would like to work through with a private counselor. They are having some real specific areas now in the area of if it's something to do with an official, if it's something to do with a supervisor, and they're going again offer the resiliency training. Resiliency 1 was last year, followed up this year with Resiliency 2. Defensive driving, Houston County did have participate in that last year. So I'm not sure if you did that online or in the classroom setting, but that's always something available to you through the Minnesota Safety Council. As far as other training, the upper right-hand corner, balancing leadership and risk while serving the public, that is a follow-up for the new commissioners. A September session that will be at the MCIT building. There we're working with AMC to provide that day of training to our new commissioners. Other trainings are available on the website. I know our annual seminar with the land use comes up in September. So just keep an eye on our website for any other further trainings coming up. That pretty much wraps up what I have. Thank you for your time. Thank you for Houston County's participation with MCIT. Any other questions, I'd be happy to try and answer.
As far as the lawyers that represent the county on any specific issues, do you have the same ones that you assign each time, or does the county have any opportunity to suggest or?
Well, for consistency purposes, we do have a panel of attorneys. Now, which one specifically on that panel could be discussed with MCIT.
Okay. Now, not quite sure how to phrase this, but do the lawyers, are they protecting MCIT as well as the county?
It's always looked at as a combined effort.
Okay, because I'll just be honest, most recently I thought that the county had some issues that I thought were rather egregious and could not sway the MCIT attorney 1 millimeter to take that into account, and that bothers me, I guess.
It would be my recommendation, if you have an issue like that, to speak with our claims manager and our executive director, because she, I'm sure you're all familiar with Robin Sykes, and she's very involved on the claim end.
Okay.
Obviously, we have a claims director, but on cases that are larger or kind of sensitive, she would be definitely happy to listen to you.
Okay. But overall, I think MCIT is an excellent provider of the services that we sorely need as we operate our government. So appreciate your time. Anyone else have questions? Or
Do you know what the dividend will be for this year?
That announcement will be out fairly soon.
In July now?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's something that probably the actuary already has it,
so we can plan
numbers
vacation.
to
Okay.
present to the board.
Just curious.
Yep.
You said 80 of 87. What is it? Mainly the metropolitan areas that aren't in, or?
Right. And
Okay.
actually with Houston County, it's 81.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, true. Yeah.
So there's 6. And Olmsted being one of them.
Sure.
The other 4 right in the metro, Hennepin, Ramsey, Dakota, Anoka, and then St. Louis County.
Do they?
Duluth.
Are they insuring themselves, or what's?
Yes.
Okay.
And they actually have full-time risk management departments.
Oh.
What we suspect is that we know that they adjust their own liability. They probably self-fund their work comp. In the areas of property, they likely have some very high self-insured retention deductible programs in place.
I see.
All right. Thanks again, and
All right.
appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you.
I saw Brian.
Hey, it was here.
We went out to talk to Dave.
Tess,
a minute.
can you see if Brian's out in the hall, please?
That's a good point. That that's a good point.
We don't want to spend too much.
Yeah, right.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Try to get you back on the schedule a little bit more and make this quick. I have one project I'd like to final out. It's project CP 2016-801. This is a FEMA project from the flood damage from last fall. Project original contract was for $48,900. Work certified $51,201, so it was a little bit of overruns, primarily due to extra riprap used at some ditches and culvert outlets and inlets. This was for damage on various roadways, County 15, 18, 25, 26, 33, and County 8. So overall, work went really good, and we're ready to final out the project, so I'd like to get approval.
Who does, Brian, who estimates this first? Does the highway department?
Yes, we do the
Look
estimate.
at it and estimate it.
On the FEMA projects, it's actually kind of a partnership between the highway department and FEMA. So ultimately, FEMA is going to tell us, yes, they agree with the estimate, no, they don't. If they don't, they tell us what they will put in there, so.
Yeah, there's a percentage overrun. They're not asking any problems for overruns either.
Nope. Even though we have several different projects here, small projects under a certain threshold, they actually look at how much money was given to the county as a whole. So if we have some projects coming under, some as coming over, they look at everything combined together. If we spend more than what was in the original estimates, we can go back and try to recoup some additional money from FEMA. There's a process for that. But generally, overall, we're pretty close on the overall.
Okay, great. I'll make a motion to approve SB
Final payment.
final payment for CP 2016-801.
Yep.
I'll second it.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Approved.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I would assume you're Callie. Good morning. Thank you.
can share. Thank you. The reporters probably want some.
All right, good morning. Thank you for taking time for the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation. My name is Callie Roland-Hagen, and I'm our communications coordinator. So, I just want to put a disclaimer out that this is my first county presentation. I've been with Smith for about 2 years, so I'll try to field as many questions as I can. Just give you an overview, but know that if I don't have the answers, I'm happy to take those back and get those. So
This is your first, you said?
yeah, I was over in Harmony this morning giving a little interview over there, so it's been a good day down in Houston and Fillmore County already.
Well, we'll try to make you as nervous as we can.
It's always a joy to come down here. This is a beautiful, beautiful part of our region. So as you know, Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation serves the 20 counties of South Central and Southeastern Minnesota. We're a 30-year-old rural economic development foundation, and Houston County has been supporting us for quite some time. So first of all, just a heartfelt thanks for all of your support. I know you did increase that a couple years ago, and that it really helps us to get outside funds. We need matching funds, just like people that are applying for our grants need to have a match. So we like to say that for every $1 invested locally, we're able to leverage an additional $10 from outside sources. So to take kind of a high-level view, in our first 30 years, you can see in our last year annual report, your donation is making a difference in Houston County and in our 20-county region. We've invested over $100 million, and that has gone to create over 7,200 jobs in our region, help touch about 100,000 kids and families through our early childhood programming, help seed about 26 community foundations currently are under our umbrella, and just had a lot of other community development outcomes through the work, and none of that would be possible without our donors. So to take it to a more local Houston County level, there's a fact sheet in here that lists out what your return on investment to the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation is. You're a little bit above the $10 for $1 average. For every $1 invested locally and here in Houston County, we're returning another $11 through grants, loans, and programming dollars here in your county. Over the past 30 years, that's equated to about $1.6 million in investments. And we are about to launch our new strategic plan, which we will be keeping our same focus areas for that through the next several years. One of those is obviously early childhood. We really think that investments in early childhood and our next generation are a good long-term economic development strategy for our region. So to that end, we have had a couple of our quality child care trainings in your region. We've worked with several great child care providers here to really focus on quality, to get them to see themselves as business people and not just people that are taking care of kids. We've invested over 1,000 book donations just in the last 3 years, from 2014 to the present, through our bookstore program. And we also place a couple AmeriCorps people at the Ridgeway School, as well as we had one in La Crescent, the Montessori school there. And those AmeriCorps members really come alongside the teachers to provide social emotional development skills so that when kids get to kindergarten, they're not quite as fidgety, they've got some interpersonal relationships, they're ready to learn better. So those are some of the investments that our early childhood programming takes. We've also been working on pre-K to grade 3 alignment, and Houston County has seen some of those investments through trainings. We've been bringing in a national researcher from the University of North Carolina to help school districts look at how do your pre-K investments align with those later strategies. So the second bucket that we look at is really economic development. We've made several loans to Houston County over the past 30 years. Those are listed on the back side of your fact sheet. Not only do we provide loans for small businesses, but we have, since we're not a bank, we don't have FDIC insured regulations, we can also provide technical assistance with that and just be more flexible in the type of businesses that we work with, and we often provide gap financing. So you can see what some of those loan clients, and we also have equity pools available too for people needing some larger scale investments. And the third bucket that we really focus on at the foundation is what we call our kind of community vitality, community development work. That really focuses on things like seeding our community foundations. So our region is very generous, filled with generous communities. There's a lot of wealth. A lot of that comes in the form of land and farmland. So I do want to call attention in your packets to our Preserving Our Heritage fact sheet. We know that there's some landowners, farmers that might be retiring that don't have heirs necessarily to pass their land onto. If there's not a plan for where that land goes, it can go to the state. So this program is really intended to keep dollars from farmland donations local. Alyssa Blaha, our development coordinator, is in conversation with Houston County. She'll be down here again next week setting up a community foundation for Houston. A gift of farmland could be made directly to that foundation, and the proceeds off of that would go to benefit charitable causes. The county benefits because taxes still going to the county for that. Renters can still continue to farm that land. So it's really a win-win-win across the board. So I just want to let you know that that's a resource that will be even more helpful once you have some Houston County local community foundations in place. In the meantime, you can also make those donations directly to the foundation. And she's also in talks with Caledonia as well. So I think Fillmore County has about 6 community foundations currently in it. And so we're really excited that Houston County is getting some boards together to really look at that. It's a great vehicle for the county to capture philanthropic dollars and to keep those dollars local. We do all of the nitty-gritty back-end stuff, so you don't have to worry about the tax forms and fees and all of that stuff. It's really for the communities to just focus on raising the dollars and then granting them back out. So those are our 3 main program areas. I want to call attention to the fact that we do have some new opportunities coming up that will benefit a lot of Houston County communities. We just launched our Rural Entrepreneurial Venture. This is a new program for us. It's a pretty significant investment. Up to 5 communities will be selected from across our 20 counties for a 3-year kind of entrepreneur-focused economic development opportunity. So we'll be working one-on-one with a trained coach with a group of about 5 to 7 people selected from the community to look at where are our entrepreneurial activities, whether that's from kids that have moved away, from retirees, from business owners that maybe have one successful business already. So that will be a really strategic planning process, and down the road there'll be some grant dollars available to the communities that are selected for that. So the applications for the Rural Entrepreneurial Venture, which we are calling REV, will be July 14th. So I encourage you, if you haven't already thought about that, that's a great opportunity. And to be released this week will be a press release about our new small town grants program. So part of our strategic plan is, we're keeping the same focus areas, but we really want to double down on the smallest communities in our region. We do have Mankato and Rochester in our region. We make investments there, but we really feel like our small communities are the pulse of our region, and we want to make sure that our investments are equitably going to them. So this grant program, it will be competitive. Up to 10 communities will be eligible for up to $10,000. It's fairly flexible in the sorts of grants that we'll be accepting, things like strategic planning, leadership development, projects that you feel would really add and enhance the vitality of your community. Those would be eligible. So look for a press release coming out on that sometime this week. And that's a new program for us this coming year, and those will be due at the end of August.
Okay, you're confusing me with it. July 14th is a deadline for...
So July 14th is a deadline for REV, the Rural Entrepreneurial Venture, and that's really kind of a 3-year-long investment to help with entrepreneurship creation and generation.
And one gets that information where?
I can forward that up, follow up on that with you.
Okay.
A press release went out a few months ago.
Do you communicate at all, like with our EDA?
Yes, the
Yeah.
EDAs, the city chambers, we have as many current emails as we have for our county boards on that as well. So if it didn't come through, that's just a communication issue that I'm happy to know about.
Okay, well, I can speak with her and see if
Okay.
she's up to speed, but.
Sure.
Okay,
I know that Courtney Burgee with CETA has been looped in on that, and so she has been working with some people
that's our
yeah.
lady, so.
Actually, Courtney today is with Tim Penny, our president, and Pam Bishop over at the distillery. They had a 9 a.m. distillery meeting to go around Spring Grove and see some of the outcomes from the Spring Grove Past, Present, and Future grant that we gave. That was about $20,000. So
Good.
they're seeing some fruits of that grant today. I think those were the main things that I wanted to make sure that I highlighted. I'll just point out the other materials in your packet. The affiliate funds brochure just gives a little bit more information around not only do we have 26 community foundations under our umbrella, but a bunch of other donor advised funds. If there's a donor that specifically wants to invest in school scholarships or an arts initiative or whatever it might be, know that we can be really helpful in setting those things out and making sure that those could fall under your future community foundations here in Houston County. And our latest newsletter is in there as well. So with that, I just want to say thank you again for your continued support in the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation. It really, when we're applying for grants to McKnight, to Otto Bremer, to Blue Cross Blue Shield, to all of these other funders that we're soliciting grants from, seeing that we have the support from so many of our cities and counties makes a huge difference. So I'll open it up for any questions that you all might have now.
Anyone? Fred?
Just a comment. I was at a county board meeting quite a few years ago when Tim Penny was here and talked about this. It was in the beginning stages. And I thought, that sure sounds good, but I wonder if he's going to be able to make it work. And I'm glad it's working.
Yes.
It really seems to be making a lot of progress, and I'm really delighted to see it.
No, and I think the more that our communities start to utilize our resources, it kind of perpetuates itself. More people are aware of us as a resource. You know, in 30 years, we've been serving 20 counties. There's about 174 communities in those 20 counties. So it's kind of a big task to let all of them know exactly what this Minnesota Initiative Foundation model is. We're a lender, we're a grant maker, we're a community development support agent. We give money, but we also ask for money. So from a communication standpoint, it's just can be a little bit tricky. But once you start getting some of these investments, it really does help for people to see it as a valuable regional resource. So I'm glad to hear that. And Tim does have a history of just getting things done. He's a very practical, kind of common sense leader for the foundation, and he's been there for about a decade now. Great.
All right. Anyone else? Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate
Thank you for
it.
your time.
Dave? Good morning.
In your packets, we had sent some information in regard to the new buffer law that's had been proposed by the governor as now legislation. The program consists of a couple of alternatives, and that's one thing we need from the board today. A direction to the staff as far as how we want to implement the program. The two options are is what we can do is either turn the enforcement back to Bowser, BWSR, or the county can take over the implementation and enforcement of the program. And that's kind of what we're here today. Part of the program, what it's going to do is will be, I know the SCS, whether they will be technically involved with it throughout, but the county's got the option of the enforcement part of it, of either implementing it or turning it back to the state. And there is timelines with this program, and we're about at the crunch time here as far as whether we want to take it over or not, that we have to get back to the state. So with that, maybe I'll turn it over to Aaron and Dave, and they can get into the technical portions and any questions that you as a board may have.
Sure. As Rick said, tomorrow is actually the deadline for counties to indicate to Bowser whether or not they wish to opt in for enforcement locally or let that fall to the state. It doesn't lock you in perpetually moving forward. However, if we are to receive FY18 dollars, that notice has to be sent tomorrow. The buffer law, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the workings of it, and Dave can touch on some of the more technical aspects too, but it essentially is a 50-foot vegetative buffer along public waters. There are some alternatives you can do for that. It's in line with existing state shoreline rules, so it's really just reinforcing a law that's already in the books, however not really enforced much. The nice thing about this, perhaps from a county's perspective, is that it's providing some funding if we do choose to do that enforcement. We've got funding in $50,000 range for FY18 and a bit higher for FY19, and that's projected to move forward, although there's no certainty, I suppose, that will happen, but that's much in the same way that many of our grants, like the feedlot grant, works in the same way. In your packets, we prepared a resolution that would opt the county into that if you so choose to do so. That would need to be provided to Bowser by, I think, 4 o'clock tomorrow in order for us to take advantage of the funding that's being offered for 18.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, have we discussed as far as implementation monies going towards that, going to soil and water, or is it staying in planning and zoning for enforcement, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the SWCD will be the technical provider, much like the feedlot and wetland programs, and we bill the environmental services quarterly for that work that's being done. So I see this work in the same way, where the money will stay at the courthouse here and bill quarterly for the work being done.
Okay, I had a recent conversation with commissioners from 2 bordering counties, and they expressed concern about adding waterways that were not consistently waterways, that maybe during a flood get some water and for the next 10 years don't, but wanted to, their concern was, for lack of a better term, empire building on the part of Bowser or Soil and Water. And my question would be, are we doing that? And if so, this money that we are supposed to be getting, is it going to be sufficient to not add staff and overtime and, you know?
Right.
I want this up.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the other waters that are not public waters. They have nothing to do with this buffer initiative. That's something totally different. That's not going to be enforced at this time. So
Great.
we won't even be, unless the landowner wants to address those areas, of course, we'll visit with the landowner to give out recommendations and get them on board. But at the moment, those are off the table.
Okay.
Whether or not we were to opt in as the county wouldn't affect what's included in the buffer requirement either.
Okay.
It only would impact where the enforcement component were to come from in the event of a non-compliant situation. If we opt in, the county does it. If we opt out, or if we don't opt in, the state does it, but it doesn't have any practical effect on what's included.
Okay, you're talking 50,000 is what we would get if we, as a county, enforce it?
Approximately.
Have you had the opportunity to determine whether that 50,000 is going to cover our costs so that we aren't?
We've had some conversations within our department and with other departments. I think we are confident that it would cover the the cost of the program. However, it's hard to know exactly because the cost of an enforcement is hard to predict at this point. Things
Okay.
can escalate. Maybe they can be
What
more.
do you see it as? Do you feel we have the personnel presently to handle this?
Well, that's one thing we're going to go through and work with the Soil Conservation Service. What I look at, like I said, most of these grants coming through, it starts with the soil conservation, and like I said, we have that past history and working relationship with them and the expectations on going forward. The thing is, what is going to hard to put a finger on is how much enforcement and to what degree. I think Dave had let out the information here that there's probably 80% or better compliance in the county already with the 50-foot buffer. So there's that 15 to 20% that we still got to work with, and that's being done as we're sitting here. So I mean, and then like I said, if there's a problem out there, I look at it. Anything else we have of trying to work with the landowner prior to doing any enforcement, but there is a process in place in the program where they can appeal different decisions,
Right.
Going all the way up to the state. So, like the wetlands, I mean, that's we've only had in probably 20-some years of that program at the counties. I can only remember just one that really has that went through the full course of the process and appeals. It does get expensive. By the time it goes through and the information and the duplications and the staffing and attorneys and everything else of working those cases through the program. So I mean, it can happen, but as far as trying to put a price tag on it, that would be very difficult this time, Mr. Chairman.
We did sit down and visit with Sam as well about it, and also not to forget about the penalty order itself as well, which would then kick in, so there would be funds coming into the county for that service as well.
If we were to opt in here, we need to provide a resolution saying that we intend to incorporate these rules in the zoning ordinance. When we draft that language, we have some options as to how we want to compel compliance if necessary. What the state's recommending is a administrative penalty order framework whereby you assess fines for non-compliance. Those fines, as I understand it, come back to the county. So while we're incurring costs to do enforcement, that's being offset by, I guess, the enforcement tool, in this case, being assessing fines to the non-compliant landowners. I don't know if that comes all out in the wash, but it's anytime you're incurring costs, I guess you're also bringing in revenue, I suppose, is one way to look at it.
Okay, so we say we don't opt in, then we pay Bowser to, no?
The money that's set aside for the counties then would remain within the coffers of Bowser. And then counties would not receive anything.
Okay,
Then Bowser will do the enforcement.
Yes. The thing is, what they're giving the counties the opportunity is if they're, and it's no different than the feedlots or the shorelands or the other grants that we have. We took those over locally because basically it gives the landowner somebody to come in and talk to and to interact with, and there's a lot of follow-up when it's held locally. And this thing would be no different, where we do have, like I said, we can turn the whole program back to the state.
So if we needed to get out, we could.
There's a 60-day process, yes, where we notify the state that we can get out.
okay, because I favor the local aspect of it, because I'm sure our staff is familiar with a lot of the landowners already, and my fear again is that we create something that suddenly, we got to add somebody, and we need this and that, and I don't want to start down that road, because once you get
Yeah, I don't see that happening at all. You know,
Okay.
the 50,000, what is that, quarter-time employee to begin with? We're out on the landscape every day. We have several different opportunities or jobs going on with landowners. So for their doing waterways or structures, you know, we might as well be there doing buffers.
Yeah,
you
a
know,
lot of
so-
overlapping.
Exactly.
Well, and we do this with the feedlot program. That's why initially it started out between the soil conservation and us, because okay, we're not just talking the feedlot, but our initial intent was to cover the full farm rather than just the feedlot itself, and that has served us fairly well in getting other practices, you know, on the land for erosion problems and different things too at the same time.
So we will have documentation, say after a year, how much environmental services has been billed, and we can, at that time, again, say, you know, we got billed for $80,000, we're gonna turn this back to Bowser, here's your 60-day notice, correct?
We will not bill over the amount.
Yep.
Period. Yep.
But
so-
yeah, we can look at it one year, keep it local,
Yep.
try it, we can always go back and say, this isn't working for us, here you go, Bowser, correct?
Right.
I think when we have all these different grants too, you can look at, you know, I guess I'm not fully committed to the idea that you wouldn't potentially add personnel using all these various grants to come in to get a better service level locally. If you look at the environmental service office, we've got a couple components. We've got solid waste, and then we've got the zoning, and then we administer all these programs. Right now, we are using a model where we are in a way subsidizing a lot of the zoning and planning with the grants that come through. I think that model, while it's cost effective, I suppose, it probably leaves something to be desired in terms of the quality of work output that comes due to the amount of time that's allotted to, say, the planning components there. If you're funding all that zoning planning through feedlots, wetlands, shoreline, all these various grants, I think the idea of the grants is that dedicates the time to whatever that function is, whereas we're kind of piggybacking on that function to try to cover the cost of some of these other things. Now, I don't have any sort of hard answer to you one way or the other, but I don't think it's something that we would want to say we're not going to look at.
As the board's representative on these various water committees, I would move that we adopt the proposed resolution.
I would second that motion.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just one note, July 6th, we will be having our next household hazardous waste collection over in Spring Grove. It'll be at the highway shop over there, so I know a lot of people pay attention to the commissioners. I just want to kind of get a little free advertisement there.
Yeah, thank you.
So July 6th and it goes from 1 to 6 over at the Spring Grove highway shop. Thank you.
Yeah, being Rick chimed in, I'll chime in too. I've been giving you guys a tour the last few years, and I've been delaying the tour this year due to the fact that we're going to be fixing up those Winnebago structures, and I wanted to give you guys the tour during construction. So I talked to the contractor this last week, and they're thinking about starting the end of July. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind, but I'll contact Shar on some stable dates, and maybe we can get out there during construction and take a tour of all those structures, and because you guys supported that with sponsorship during that last rain event, so it'd be nice to tour that once again. So
I
stay
really like
posted.
that tour. That's
Good.
very interesting.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Want to just email that over, and I can send that on the Bowser.
Oh, okay, I thought Vern was going to.
I'll talk.
I'll get it to both of you.
Perfect.
Next, I have no names, but I do have MnDOT. Ladies? Full of packets today.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Rhonda Ollis, and I am the Planning Director for MnDOT District 6 out of the Rochester District Office. With me also is Tracy Schnell, who's on our planning staff as well. We'd like to thank you for giving us some time this morning to come out and meet with you and share with you our 10-year plan that we have for the district. We're going to talk a little bit, just to give you a real quick overview of what's in your packet. There's going to be a lot of information in there. We're not going to touch on all of it today. On the right-hand side, you're going to have a copy of our PowerPoint presentation from this morning. You're going to have a copy next of our draft 10-year plan. And then behind that are a couple of one-pagers that may provide you some good information as it comes to, you know, how to request speed limit changes within your communities, how cost participation as it relates to our latest policy, street lights, access management, some of those. So we're not going to talk about those today. Those are just kind of for your information. On the left-hand side of the packet, you'll have a couple of maps. The first one will be a map of our current construction year, so we'll talk a little bit about what's happening here in Houston County. Behind that are two maps. You're going to see one is going to say 2018 to 2021, and then the next one says 2022 to 2027. And I'll explain the difference between those two, but combined, you'll notice it equals 10 years. So that those two together equal our 10-year plan. And then the last map is just going to be one specific to Houston County. So kind of taking all that information from all the maps and just worrying really about what's happening here within your county. So to start out, I just want to kind of give a little context to what it is that we do in the planning section and why we're here to share with you today our 10-year plan. So our planning office works closely with our local governments, both city and county, as well as our metropolitan planning organizations within our 11 county district on all things kind of transportation planning. We are multimodal, so we look at more than just our highway investments, but taking a look at also where we might be able to do some pedestrian and bicycle investments. We take a look at safety improvements, transit accommodations, kind of the whole works. And we're here today to kind of share with you where we're at on that 10-year planning process. So I gave you a copy of the plan, that draft plan in your packet. And I want to talk kind of a little bit about the 10-year planning process and then our next steps as we look forward to what projects we'll be moving into, moving up into our 4-year program. So it's important for you to understand MnDOT's 10-year planning process. Now we do this every year. So this plan is updated annually. The first 4 years, so that map that I showed you that says 2018 to 2021 projects, that's the first 4 years of our 10-year plan. Those are projects that we have committed to, that we have identified funding for, that given any unforeseen circumstances, we consider commitments from MnDOT to those communities. The map that you see that says 2022 to 2027, those are the outer 6 years of that 10-year plan. Those are not commitments. Funding has not been secured, and it's very likely that when we look at this plan again next year, and I come to share it with you, it's going to look different. So just kind of keep that in mind. Those projects are projects that are kind of on our radar. We know there's something we need to be dealing with. We might be able to see those projects move up a year. They may move back a year. They may fall completely out of that 10-year plan in our next update. So keep in mind those are not guaranteed projects at this point in those outer 6 years. This just provides a little bit of an overview of what we have for funding and kind of some of the struggles that we run into when it comes to trying to develop our program. As you can see, we have a lot of fluctuation in the funding that we receive here at District 6. At the highest peak, we were up over $140 million for District 6 alone back in 2017. And then you can see kind of how it fluctuates over these next few years. We are anticipating in 2027 to be back up around the $97 million funding level for the district. But this obviously makes it difficult for us to plan some investments when our funding really is taking some heavy shifts from year to year. Not going to spend a lot of time on these two little pie charts. What I really want to point out to you, what's important for you to keep in mind. On the left-hand side, you're going to see this actually represented our 10-year plan from last year. You can see when you look at the green sections of that pie, the PC stands for pavement projects and the BC stands for bridge projects. And you can see there was a fairly even split in our funding going between pavements and bridges. If you take a look at the next 6 years of that 10-year plan, you can see a larger shift going into pavements, less money going into bridges. What we're finding across the state is our pavement conditions are worsening faster than our bridge conditions, and so we've had to do a little shift in funding to accommodate the greater needs on the pavement side. The other little programs you can see remain about the same. They're bicycle investments, pedestrian investments, safety improvements, and then the PS is called program support or project support, and that's basically the cost for us to deliver the project. So that might be right-of-way acquisition. If we have to hire a consultant to do some design work, that's the cost for MnDOT to deliver our projects in any given year. The next chart, what I really want to point out on this one, again, this gives an overview statewide of all of the MnDOT districts. So for those of you who may be interested, when you see ATP 1, that's going to be up in the northeastern part of the state. That'll be the kind of the Duluth area. ATP 2 is the northwestern part of the state. 3 is going to hit the central, so kind of the lakes area down to St. Cloud. 4, we're over on the west, more like the Fergus Falls, Alexandria area. We are ATP 6. We're going to come back to that one, so just keep that in mind. ATP 7 is going to be southwestern, so Mankato all the way over to the South Dakota border. ATP 8 kind of hits the Wilmer area, and then the metro, obviously, and then you can see the numbers statewide. But what I want to point out to you here, when you take a look at ATP 6, the first bar on that graph is going to show you, this was as of last year's program. So when we completed our pavement projects in 2016, the condition of our pavements that were rated as poor, and this is just on what we consider so it's our national highway system, but not including our interstates. So in this case, it's going to be, your Highway 14, Highway 52, Highway 61, higher volumes. They're not our interstate systems, but they're not our lower volume, what we call our non-NHS or non-national highway, which would be your Highway 76, 13, 43, 42. So keeping in mind those segments of roadway within District 6 that are on our NHS system, when we completed our 2016 program, only 1.9% of our pavements on our NHS system were considered to be in poor condition, which is great. I think our national average or our state average, we want to keep those at about 8 to 10%. You can see when we finish the projects in our 4-year program, the ones that I said were committed projects, our pavements in poor condition go up to 4.8%. And if we were to complete all the projects in the outer 6 years of that 10-year plan, our pavements in poor condition would go up to 8.8%. So you can see the funding is not enough to keep up with the needs on the system. And that's just a reflection on our NHS system. We have similar issues happening on our non-NHS as well as our interstate system. So funding is not adequate to keep up with the needs here in the district. And you can see even a similar trend statewide. You see that those numbers going up each of those years as well. I want to skip ahead just a little bit through some of these next slides and talk a little bit. You're going to see this graph or map in your packet. And one of the major things that we do when we select our projects to include in our 10-year program is we take a look at pavement condition. And you can see based on this, so green, pavement conditions are good according to our performance measures that have been established and approved by the Federal Highway Administration. Yellow, those pavements are starting to fall into what we call our fair category, and red is when they start to fall into our poor. So you can see overall it looks like things are pretty decent in our district. But then you take a look ahead, this is remaining service life. So this tells us how many more years of pavement life do we have on those same segments of roadway. And you can see that that green is not as prevalent as it was on the previous map. We're starting to see a lot more yellow and considerably more red. And what this is telling us is that we have pavements, a lot of the fixes that we've been doing over the last few years are minimal fixes, so we maybe are coming in and doing a mill and overlay when really what we should be looking at is a higher level fix, but funding has limited us to coming in and doing new pavements. We're going to see a higher degradation on those pavements over a shorter period of time and find ourselves in a position where we're going to have a lot of pavements falling into the poor. So keep that in mind. That's an important thing to keep in mind, that even now our pavement conditions may look okay, but what we see kind of on the horizon, even looking 3 years out, you can see we're going to see a lot of those pavements going into the pour. All right, so now I just want to take a little bit of time and talk about what we're going to see happening here within Houston County. And these you can refer a little bit then over to the maps on the left-hand side. So if you take a look at the first map, these are our current year projects. And you can see in Houston County what we have this current construction season on Highway 16. We have a mill and overlay up in the La Crescent area. So that was, there's 2 segments. That's about a half a mile west of Minnesota 26 to just south of US 61. And then from US 61, from the state line east to approximately the 1661 junction, just a little bit east of there. It is just a medium mill and overlay, and that project cost is about $2.4 million total. And then we also have another project over in Hoka, and that's going to go down kind of the main drag of Hoka right through town. That will include what we call ADA improvements, so Americans with Disabilities Act. We have to make sure that when we come through our communities where there are sidewalks or pedestrian ramps, that they are up to ADA compliance. And so that is part of that project that we have happening over in Hoka. About $500,000 on that project. So total within our current year, we have just under $3 million worth of projects happening here in the county. And then I want to move on to the next map, which is our 2018 to 2021. So again, remember, these are those programmed projects. These are those projects that are committed to. You can see here in Houston County, we just have some work happening on 3 bridges over near Money Creek. So we have bridges numbers 9104, 05, and 06. We'll be doing some rehab work on those right now scheduled for 2021. So that is the only project that we have in our current 4-year program here that will impact Houston County. And then the next map, these are those 6 years out. And remember, these are the ones that are not commitments at this point. These are ones that we are considering. And what we are looking at here, and it might even be easier for you at this point to just take a look at the county map. It'll provide a little bit more detail. Now, I did include on this one the Highway 43 project, which technically is over in Fillmore County, but I would imagine could have quite an impact to some of the traffic moving into and out of Houston County. So we do have on Highway 43, it's going to be a bituminous mill and overlay from Minnesota 44 down near Mabel, and it'll go all the way to the north junction with Minnesota 16. That's just under a $10 million project coming up, and that right now is tentatively planned for 2023. We then have a project of, again, a mill and overlay on Highway 44 from CASA 12 to Hoka. So basically that comes on the south side of Caledonia, which means we will be doing some ADA work here through town as well. So we'll need to have an assessment done of the ADA needs. Right now we have that tentatively planned for 2025 with a cost of about $6.5 million. Also on 44 then, down from Spring Grove to Caledonia, we have in 2027 a project, again just a mill and overlay with an estimated cost of $4.6 million. And then just kind of looking ahead, our next update of our 10-year plan will be happening here shortly with our final due next May, but we are one of the projects that is also on our radar we're looking at is replacing Bridge 5848, which would be over the Crystal Creek east of Houston. And that project is tentatively one on our radar for 2028. Okay, so kind of our next steps in the process then, what we want to do and why we're here kind of at this point in our planning process. It is important for us as we take a look at our 10-year plan, we really want to start focusing on projects that we have in communities in what we would consider years 5 and 6. So years 2022, 2023, the next step in our process in the planning section will be to come out and meet individually with those communities and really start talking through with them some of their local needs. So do they have a safe routes to school plan that they want to look at some sidewalk improvements that they've identified, or do they have a trail plan that they'd like us? In fact, I just received a call yesterday, a message from a gentleman in this area interested in a trail along 76 within MnDOT right-of-way between Highway 16 and County Road 10 roughly, so looking at some trail connections throughout the county. Are there intersection concerns that the community has? Do they have safety concerns they want us to address? So trying to get to this information early so that as we go through and start to develop the scope for the project, we're taking into consideration local needs. Maybe there's a local city or county project happening at the same time that we could partner with them on. Maybe that could be let together and get a little bit better cost on the project. So those early conversations are what we want to start having with our communities so that as we develop the project, it is a good project, it's a good use of our dollars, and we know that as we move that project, because what happens each year, as I mentioned, we update this every year. So our process now is we are starting to look at projects that we'll be selecting for 2022. That'll be that fourth year out in our 4-year program. Those will be the ones we are going to determine we are going to commit to. And those projects will be selected now over this coming winter. Usually by about February or March, we've started to determine the projects that'll move into the next outer year of our 4-year program. So now we start to meet with the communities. We develop what we call a scoping report, which lays out what the project will consist of. Over the winter months, our project management team is refining the scopes, and then we do a selection of those projects this winter so that when we do an update of our 10-year plan next year, we know what projects are going to move into that 10-year plan. So my question to you would be to kind of keep in mind, what do we need to know happening in your respective part of your communities that you represent that we should be aware of? What we will do is reach out to those cities. Likely will include Brian in those conversations as well, and I would assume if there are any of you commissioners that are impacted, they will invite you to the meetings to have some say in that as well.
I've got one for you.
Yes.
Now, well, actually, it's a two-part thing, and I'm wondering just how we can't as a county board approach it, but how the community should approach these things. We had a rather extensive rebuilding project in Spring Grove, I think 2 or 3 years ago, I don't remember specifically, with the road through there. And there was a fair amount of controversy generated by the bump outs because some people didn't want them because that would interfere with specifically farm machinery getting through without having to move into the opposite lane. And there was a bit of a problem there. And then here in Caledonia, when the road was redone out here a few years ago, there were, the justification for the bump outs was that pedestrians would have a better chance of getting across the road if you gave them that additional help. Now, when they redid the road out here in Caledonia, there's not much provision for that. It's pretty wide. And I remember one specific incident where I was going to the ASCS office coming from the west, and I saw a man standing by the John Deere dealership, about my age, wanting to cross that road on foot. And when I got done with my business out at the office and came back, he was still there, still trying to get across that road. Now, I know that up the road a ways at the school, there's a light with a button that you can use.
Yep.
That's quite a ways up there for a guy my age to have to walk up there and whatnot. Now, how do the communities go about addressing those kinds of problems with the DOT?
Yeah, so good question. If we happen to have a roadway project coming through that we could look at a safety improvement with the roadway project, that is a time that we would have those conversations. We could look at seeing what we could include with a roadway project. We're not limited to only being able to address it when there's a roadway project. We can do what are called standalone safety improvement projects. Not uncommon for us to take a look within communities at where they have problems, especially crossing a state highway, and oftentimes it's a wider state highway. It's not pedestrian friendly. I would say if that's something that's of interest, we should talk with that community, and we'll visit with Caledonia and find out what we can't do. We do have, if you remember the chart we looked at here, one of those little slices of the pie are safety dollars. So we do have funds that we specifically have to target toward safety projects. Like I said, sometimes those dollars get eaten up within a roadway project because there are safety improvements that we have to make within that project that we need to use those dollars for. Sometimes we have funds left that we can take a look at a standalone project. So we could look at addressing something previous to a roadway project, or we could look at addressing it when we are coming through doing the project.
So it's too late now.
Yeah, it's too late now, but
Yeah,
I see
if
you
you
have
haven't-
a mill and overlay project due in Caledonia covering that particular section of road. And, okay, I just wanted to make sure that we knew, or the city knew, at what point and who do we talk to see what the possibilities are.
Yeah, so when we take a look at that project, so you're referring to the potential 2027 project?
Yeah, I saw it there someplace. I've
25?
lost track of it now specifically, but, oh, here we go. Yeah, the 2027, no, it would be
The
the
2025?
2025 project, because that goes through Caledonia.
Okay, yeah, and it's not too late for us, and those are exactly the types of things we want to hear when we come out and meet with the communities. Now, what we'll be focusing on this next round are just projects in 2022 and 2023. So we would not, assuming that that project would stay in our 10-year plan in 2025, we likely would not hit that for another year or two. But those are exactly the kinds of things that we want to hear from the community when we're starting to develop the scope of the project, so that we can try to incorporate that into the project when it moves into our 4-year program. Now, if it's a real concern and there's an issue and there's, you already have a history of people, or hopefully there haven't been any pedestrian accidents out there, but we don't have to wait and address it in 2025. We can take a look at it now. What we would do is we would turn it over to our traffic section and ask them to take a look at it and see if there's anything that they can do to address it before our roadway project even comes through.
Yeah.
So we will take that back. We'll share that with our traffic engineers and see if there's something that we can't do to accommodate something even before the potential 2025 project.
And of course, Caledonia isn't even in my district, so it's Scott's district, but
Yeah.
I just observed the problem,
Yeah.
and I thought, well, okay, let's ask.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and my business card, I failed to note, is in the front pocket of your packets. So don't hesitate to contact me. I know sometimes trying to navigate MnDOT can be a little bit tricky, so always use me as kind of a foot in the door. I may not be able to be the person to help you, but I can definitely get you to the person you would need to talk to. So any of those questions, just feel free to reach out to me.
Okay.
And I guess my final comment, maybe in closing, would also be, sometimes for me, it's more important for me, while I'm very interested in hearing your feedback on what we have identified in our 10-year plan, sometimes it's more important for me to hear from you what you think we're missing. You're the ones out here, you know the roadways, you know where the issues are. A lot of our decisions are based off of data, but data doesn't always tell the story. So if you think there's something that we have really overlooked, there's a segment of road out there that's in really bad condition that you think needs to be addressed, let me know that as well. As I said, this is updated every year. So this is our opportunity to really take a look at what the needs are and make some shifts in those projects as I start working on that next update.
Okay, I have a broader MnDOT question that's been kind of a burr under my saddle for quite some time. When you design roadways or designate them zero-death corridors, do you coordinate with law enforcement at all? I'll give you a specific example then. Highway 52 from Rochester to Minneapolis, zero death corridor. My grandson is now 17, so I've been driving that for 17 years. If I drive the speed limit, I'm in the way, and these signs, if people are going too fast to even read them. And I just saw yesterday City of La Crosse changed the speed limit on Losey Boulevard, one of their thoroughfares, to 25. They wrote 17 tickets in one day. I haven't seen 17 tickets being written in 17 years. So without enforcement, save the paint. I mean, and I've even been passed, I'll even move it up a notch. I've been passed by MnDOT vans when I've been going 70 miles an hour. So your meetings don't seem to be hitting your employees either.
Yeah, so the Towards Zero Death initiative is actually a joint initiative between MnDOT and the State Patrol. So they are in on this. This is just as much kind of their effort as it is a MnDOT effort. I hear your concern. We will take that back to the office as well, and you're right, it is an enforcement issue, but rest assured they are aware, and they are a partner with us, so law enforcement is aware of it. It's just a matter of them enforcing.
Yeah, because I mean, there's all kinds of things, if you don't enforce them, why have them?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Brian's got something to add back there.
Comment to detail on Fred's question earlier about 44th through Caledonia. I have been in contact with different ones over at the traffic office, David, as far as the intersection by Quick by Dairy Queen, as far as that cross for school kids and making improvements there. So there has been ongoing discussions on that. I also am on the TZD, the local committee and stuff with Fillmore County and MnDOT. We talked about other safety improvements on the trunk highway system. So I do have contacts myself too, along the ground and stuff. So you can let me know if you have any questions. I can pass that on as well and try to make improvements. So we are working on making improvements on 44. How quickly is it going to happen? It's going to be 2025. Quicker, later, I don't know, but we're working on it.
Good. Thank you. And
Great.
any other questions for these ladies?
We had an incident in my district down by Brownsville when they were redoing the Highway 26 there and put in that new gas station and stuff. I actually called MnDOT to try to talk to them about widening that entrance from Main Street, Brownsville, to Highway 26 because you actually can't see when you're at the corner what's coming the other direction. And they just told me it was too late, basically. So they couldn't do anything about it. So really, this should have come out
sight line.
in the.
That's a good point. That's one that should have been looked at before.
And the city of Brownsville contacted them with me, so because we thought they're right here now.
Yeah, we use that frequently because we frequent a pizza place in Brownsville. But anyhow, every time we leave, I have to ask my wife, "Can you see if anything's coming?"
It's a very dangerous. I think it's very dangerous.
What's the intersection? You signed your will?
County Road 3 and Highway 26.
Yep. It is a problem, and like I said, I couldn't get anywhere. I think I talked to Mark Anderson and at the time. And it was basically, both the city and I were told it was too late to move forward on it.
Well, yeah, and unfortunately, MnDOT has not done a great job in the past of early community outreach, and that's why we're here now. The last couple of years now, we're trying to really be more proactive, and these are the types of things that if we know about early enough, we can get those into the scope of the project.
That one really needs to be looked at.
Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes what happens though, also, MnDOT has to consider who benefits from a project, for example, such as a widening of an access. So if it benefits a single business, unfortunately, we can't use our dollars to benefit a single business. But if it's a county road.
This is a safety
widening
issue.
Yeah,
being
it's a county road.
open, then that allows us to be able to contribute financially toward that. So we'll take a look. And again, you know, ideally, it's nice to do these when we have the roadway project happening, but it doesn't limit us to that. So we will take all of these issues back, and we will follow up, and we will definitely get some responses back, and I'll likely send it through Shar, and then she can distribute you to you commissioners.
Sounds good, thank you.
Right?
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
You can't see? Very much so.
Good morning, Tess.
Good morning, Commissioners. How are you today?
Good. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, the assessor was called away and is not able to be here with me. So, however, I will proceed with our agenda as presented. We have 2 items on the agenda. The first is a request to use the current search process that we're going through to search for, which is a competitive external process, internal, external, to search for one appraiser. We're asking for a second appraiser. What has happened since the last time we met, I have a letter from a senior appraiser, a senior staff member who is giving not his official exact date, but for the purposes of planning, has announced that he will be retiring in July of 2019. As you may recall, and those of you who are on Land Use Committee, I'm certain I've probably spoken with the assessor about this, that when we hire at the training level, which is likely for any of our assessor office hires, that we have 1 year of, I was going to call it basic training, but it's base training to get the person to a point where they can do any of the appraisal work. And so it's there's quite a bit of a lag period or latent period to getting a person in and getting them trained. So we're trying to get ahead of the schedule for that. With that, any of the hiring that we do, if we are fortunate enough to hire at a higher level, you would know that ahead of time. So we're just approving the process to try to see if we can interview for 2 at this time, trying to plan for a year from now, a year and a half from now.
When that was first brought up, I think the board felt we should wait till budget time to add the second person. Now, you just said this person's leaving in 2019?
In 2019. So we're looking at using our current search for that appointment. And sending the assessor I thought there would be a benefit of sending, having training 2 at once rather than 1 at once, and some efficiencies could be achieved there.
So could we budget for it for our 2018 budget and move forward at that time?
Certainly, you can do whatever you
That would
wish.
give us a whole
We
year.
were looking at, we would initiate a different search and go through the advertisement all over again. This was the request coming from the assessor, and I bagged that, but
What,
we used to have 4 appraisers, and now we have, actually, we had a staff of, with the assessor, we had the assessor plus 4. And right now, we have the assessor plus 2, with 1 looking at going out in 19. So we're trying to plan ahead.
what educational level or experience, what do you look for in an assessor?
Well, we look for certifications if they have them. However, we feel the market is not there for folks coming with certifications to Southeast Minnesota. So the education level is a high school level. We do the training, we pay for the training and provide that. That's a year-long process.
Well, I'm just thinking about possibility of an internship in the office that could eventuate into a position, perhaps.
Of course it could. And we always encourage interns to apply. An intern is not going to be a substitute for any kind of appraiser, though. Certainly a person, because they have to have the state certification and training towards that.
Right.
How long?
But I mean, I'm sorry.
We have we have 3 levels in the assessor's office, 3 different job descriptions, depending upon your years, the hours, and the certifications you've achieved. So whether or not you can do commercial property, whether or not you can do just straight residential property.
Well,
but specifically, what is the training timeline to replace the assessor that's going to retire in 2019?
Minimum of 1 year.
Minimum 1 year.
But what's the sequence? I mean, do they go to class every week? Do they go every 3 months? What do you have any idea what
I believe some of it's online and some of it's up in the cities. I don't have that sequence, and the assessor is not here to speak to
Right.
it. So we could postpone that. Certainly, we're still in the middle of our search. However, to get them to the position of the person that's leaving is probably, if I'm adding all the sequence up correctly, is closer to 3 years to get them to that level. We're just talking about getting somebody to the basic level, and that's a minimum of 1 year. And then they start a whole nother level of training. This is a a process that takes quite a bit of time.
I think the only thing we're really looking at is whether we would put this into the budgeting process, which is what, starts a month from now?
Yep, end of 1st of August, basically.
Or do it now while you are advertising for the one position. What's the benefit of waiting?
We can budget for it.
So we can budget. I mean, this person would start before the budget.
I'd have to look at the budget to see what salary savings you have. When we replaced the assessor, we certainly didn't replace it at the same level, although we did replace it at, so there's some salary savings there, plus.
Why not bring that back, 11th, and in the meantime, if you've advertised already, so if you could go back to a potential pool, perhaps, if
Once it's budgeted.
I'm not sure that there's going to be a big pool created here, but
I just don't see a lot of savings coming from hiring 2 right away either, when we're going to look at it again in a month. I mean, I know there's some savings in not interviewing twice for the same position.
Yeah, it's not the savings. What the assessor was concerned about is actually getting the process started with the training, because the training is, like I said, a minimum to do some of the assessing at 1 year.
I guess I'd like a little better idea of what the training
for the
is.
Certifications.
Yeah.
I know it requires 1 year working besides the besides the actual coursework. It's 1 year working under the assessor that has SAMA qualified. But
so
like I said,
essentially we'd have
Cindy could really address this a lot better than
Right.
I just learned this morning she wasn't
Yeah.
able to be
Okay,
here.
let's do
How
that.
much easier it is on her and her staff to train 2 at once compared to
Well, that was part of her consideration,
in another month.
is having them go through as a cohort, so to speak, and getting that process started.
And I know, we talked about and with Human Services waiting on hiring for a new position until budgeting, this one being a replacement, or these both being replacement.
How long have we been without the third?
2 years, wasn't it? Going on now?
Well, we've only
Oh, a
lost.
little longer than that.
Oh, has it been
Yeah.
longer than that? 5 years. Oh, 5 years?
Yeah,
So
that's been
in
longer
some ways,
than
it
that.
is a replacement because it's been gone so long.
Yeah, geez, time flies.
What did you say, Carol?
When Diane left, it was decided that Tom would do appraisal work, and then Cindy and Carl and Rich would also do appraisal work, that it wasn't deemed necessary
To replace her.
at that time.
Right.
Okay.
It might be different circumstances now.
Well,
What's the
and we're
timeline
not
from a
exact, we're
replacement to
not
a new hire?
looking at the circumstance of a permanent replacement for all positions. It's just that you had that overlap for a period of time, so you also have the benefit of having the individuals that are in the office to do this training, because quite honestly, a lot of the training is from the staff internally as well.
Say we did hire someone test like this, and we send them to this training. Do we have any guarantee that they're going to
stay?
That they can't. I know sometimes you can
Oh,
write into
no.
a position that if we're going to spend this training with you, you can't work in this same field for X amount of years after you leave.
A non-compete agreement, we
Yeah.
do not have non-compete agreements in the
It
county
seems kind of
government,
worrisome to put
although,
someone in there a year ahead of time and start training them for a
Yeah.
job that someone's going to leave in a year and a half and not know that they're going to end up working for the county once this person leaves.
that is always a risk, but that hasn't been an issue for this county, that we train people and spend money on them to move on. I mean, certainly we've had some turnover, but it hasn't been the history in this department. And it has, the interest so far that I have received has been from folks that are kind of local, so we're looking at having to grow our own, so to speak, and that's our challenge. We don't attract in this field because we don't, quite honestly, our pay in this particular field is a bit under market. So we are likely going to have to train our own, grow our own, which there's nothing wrong with that.
But if we waited to budget time to talk about this and add it, they would start January of 2018. It still gives us 1 full year before the person retires in 19.
Right. I think the real issue comes up at what they're looking for is the double training of 2 people and only being
That's
offset
part of it.
by a matter of 3 months or something.
Why don't we have the assessor who can be here on the 11th?
Yes.
She can answer your questions directly that I cannot answer on that. But this was her proposal that I talked to her about. I agreed with her on it. I thought for the few months we're talking about that it made a lot of sense, but she can address your
Yeah.
training questions where
Good.
I can't.
To know if they
Okay.
both got it, if they're both going to the same classes, how much that would be. Yeah, there'd be a
Well, they do a
that
lot of the
needs
work here. They do some of the work on the road. They do a lot of the training here. I believe much of the training is also online, but a lot of the training falls to the current staff because they have to work under certain certifications and licenses for a particular period of
We'll
time.
plan on the 11th then. Okay.
Okay, the next one is the proposed Next Gen 911 contract with Schneider Corporation. I sent that along with the packet. This is would bring us up to speed with the state of Minnesota in Next Generation 911, which is, I understand, a 3-phase project. This is the 2nd phase of the project, which is requiring standardization and maintenance of the geospatial data for all local governments, whether you're city, county, et cetera. It's my understanding that the goal, albeit maybe a soft target, but the goal is to complete this work by 2018. The previous GIS coordinator had been working with Schneider Corporation to determine what role they might be able to provide. They are the folks that do our beacon maintenance and updates right now. So we have to have, where we're short, is in our rural address points, which we need to have up to 98% compliance by 2018, and we need to have our road center line data at 100% by that same date. The contract actually provides for both these services, for the professional services for both of this, at a total of $22,220.50. I worked with the county attorney to finalize this agreement as far as the language. The address points would be running at 11,821 and the centerline data layer at about 10.4. I know there was the former previous GIS coordinator felt that maybe it would be initially that we'd have to hire somebody to do that. We looked at potentially that being done internally. I think this is more cost effective, and it is a one-time commitment.
And it's payable through the fund.
And it is properly payable through the fund. Ryan Smith, I had everybody stand me up today. Ryan Smith was hoping to be here. He's a GIS specialist from Schneider Corporation. He will be on site tomorrow, but he wasn't able to make it for the board presentation today.
What time will he be here tomorrow?
I meet with him at 9 o'clock. I'm hoping to introduce him to the emergency management director as well, because of the coordination of the spatial data and how it might be used there. And I believe there's some training in the afternoon.
Is there a time I could meet the gentleman?
Meet him at 9 o'clock with
9
me
o'clock?
if you wish.
There is some
There's training at
training
2?
session at, I think, 1.
At 1, okay.
o'clock.
I know that got moved around, so
Yeah,
I
it
didn't
was
hear the
Thursday,
final
then
date.
it's tomorrow, and I believe it's 1 o'clock in the basement of the CJC.
Okay, so you need a motion to approve this.
Motion to approve the contract with Schneider Corporation.
And that was for 22,000, a one-time payment type idea, or?
Yes.
$22,220.50. If there's additional work, we'd have to talk to him about it.
What's the board's pleasure?
I'll make a motion to approve Snyder Corp's.
I'll second.
Further questions or discussion?
Well, so so this is a motion to approve the service agreement as of right now? Correct?
Correct.
There's 22,000.
To get us up to the state standards
Yeah.
for Next Gen 911.
So what's the presentation tomorrow, what's he going to cover if we already approved?
Tomorrow, he's here to do some training with the assessor and the zoning administrator, as well as present a program, overview a program with them that they may be interested in. I believe that was between he and Aaron, looking at some things potentially for that department. And then he's also going to do a bit of training with them. I'm going to meet with them over the, in anticipation of actually your planning meeting coming up, as to the, a discussion of kind of the multiple layers and how they're used across counties, across municipalities.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Oh, lastly, Highway Department. Last week, we met. We deferred the determination for a mechanical tool annual, I put annual stipend, it's a monthly stipend, to this week. I did have some regional data for you that the other counties in our region, I believe there are 11 counties, actually supply the tools. The county that does not supply the tools, I forward that information to you as well, which is a county out that I responded back that's outside of our region. They have a $300 a month stipend. There was a question as to, came up during the week in the course of conversation as to why we can't just require the tools to be brought forth without payment. And my response to that is, to that question was that we cannot require private resources to be used for public benefit without compensation as a government entity.
What was the suggested compensation?
My suggested compensation based upon the historic payment in the, I think it was the mid-90s, was $275. My recommendation last week was $325.
You know, and I'm not going to, I don't know enough about the history and so forth, but I do know one can lease an awfully nice car for $325 a month. I'm just wondering if it's commensurate with the value. I mean, if the tools are worth $3,000, would anybody lease them for $300 a month? I don't think so.
Well, we're talking approximately close to $30,000 worth of tools.
$30,000?
Yes. It's my understanding that yesterday I just had a brief conversation with the engineer that the individual was, there were certain tools we were short, and he was short, and there was another $500 purchase yesterday. I don't think it takes too much to get to that point. We do have a history of paying the previous mechanic some for use of those tools. We have and have paid others in the county when we've had to use their tools. The county board can go out and purchase all those tools themselves. We had in the past. Maybe the county engineer once, I don't believe. Are you there?
Fred, you had...
I'd invite him to come up here. I don't have the entire history on that, but I know that historically we used to have the tools, and there was we
Fred,
shifted.
You had some constituents that contacted you. Do you have some?
Well, apparently there's a difference somehow that I'm not totally clear about between private industry and a public entity as far as what is the way that things are done relative to tools and mechanics. The people that I know in the private sector that serve various businesses as mechanics, it's just accepted procedure that they purchase their own tools, they use their own tools on the job. I'm talking hand tools. I'm not talking specialized, expensive tools that are particular to a particular machine or something like that. I'm talking about end wrenches, socket sets, hammers, etc. It's just, to guys working in private industry, it's just accepted that when they graduate from mechanic school, they're going to have to buy some tools.
Well,
and they buy tools and a cabinet, and when they're done for the day, they put the tools in the cabinet, they close the door, they turn the key in the lock, and they walk away, and in the morning they come back and they unlock their toolbox again, and that's the way it goes.
Commissioner, I can try to address that for you.
Yeah.
There are 2 points that are relevant to being in this situation for a public employer. Keeping in mind the public employer is, quote unquote, the government. And when we talk about being the government and being a public employer, then that means that all of those certain aspects of both state and federal constitution apply to us that may not be applicable to private employers are private citizens. So when the government asks someone to bring their personal property to work to use for the public good, then we cannot use that property, or should not use that property, I would say could not, without compensating them for government use of private resources. And that's a very major difference between private and public. The second one is, and this is just something that as I was thinking about this morning, when if we were to require use of private resources for public good, that would, at some point, I would guess, well, first of all, it would probably trigger a concern with the union because of, but moreover for me, it would trigger a concern for our comp worth analysis. So when we file our compensation with the state of Minnesota for what each of these positions, what we pay them, I would have to figure out what we back out for them making these, for this free loan, if you will. And I'm not even sure how you would do that, but it would impact your comparable worth, how you do your compensation for that position. It is cleaner, you either supply all the tools or you pay a fair value for those tools on a monthly basis. The only information I have on a fair value is the historic data that we have at this county, plus the data from Crow Wing.
Okay, let's,
I was going to bring up one point. Years ago when my husband became the county surveyor, he had his own equipment, and he did get a rent check each month. It was like $50 or something to use his equipment until the county bought their own with the highway.
So
that this is not a new.
Right, we've done it
precedent.
before.
Yeah.
A couple of things I will chat about. I'm going to say this, I don't mean this to sound arrogant, but I have to say it to preface why I'm speaking about this. As a certified mechanic, I've been down this road. So what Fred's saying is true as far as the private sector. When going to school, we got big discounts from Snap-on, Matco, Craftsman to buy our tools. So we got them at a discounted rate. I purchased $10,000 to $12,000 worth of tools. All mechanics have tools, buy tools. And yes, in the private sector, there are some employers that will compensate and say, we'll give you X amount of extra money in your hourly rate because you're bringing tools. Other ones say it's just part of the job. It's just like getting an education. You paid $40,000 a year to get your education. You're investing into your job. Also, the specialized tools, Fred's right. In the aircraft world, we had a lot of specialized tools that we're not required to get, but it's the hand tools, the wrenches, sockets, things like that. I get what Tess is saying, and Teresa brings that up too, as far as using tools in the government side versus the private side. My heartburn, I guess, comes in when we look at the price, because I'm just doing the math. And at $325 a month, correct?
That was my recommendation.
Yeah, right. And nothing wrong with that, but at $325 a month, over the course of 10 years is $39,000, which is way more than any tools that a mechanic would be bringing in. I guess part of the discussion I'd like to have is this getting to a point where should the county be investing more into tools for a mechanic? The reason I say that, if our previous mechanic was getting, even over the 10 years, $30,000, and then over the next 10 we spent another $40,000. We spent $70,000 in tools, which, like I brought up last week, a majority of those tools have lifetime warranties on them that you break it, you're not going to pay to replace it anyway. And a lot of tools wouldn't break within 10 years or 20 years or whatever the case may be. So I guess I'm just wondering if that amount, with all things considered, is excessive.
Do you believe, Commissioner, the $275 that we paid historically, that was in the budget, would be appropriate?
I guess from my previous experiences in looking at it mathematically, yeah, I do. I think it's excessive. I understand compensating for the use of tools. I understand the wear and tear of the tools. I understand if something breaks on the job, breaks replacement of somebody's privately held tools.
I guess Tess is wondering, are you comfortable with the 275?
No. In where I'm getting at with this is I don't believe we should be renting tools at the value of replacement over a 10-year period. When it's over 10 years, we've fully paid for that set of tools for a mechanic to bring forward. I guess if we're going to do that, I'd rather see the county purchase the tools ourselves, if that makes sense. I guess, and I understand compensating for the wear and tear and the use of them, but to have full replacement after 10 years, I don't think is appropriate, no.
I would ask Brian a direct question. In your opinion, would the county be better served if we simply own the tools, or should we continue to pay tool, whatever they call it, whatever, tool compensation, whatever. I lose the term. Stipend, there we go.
I'm really up in the air in this one. I don't know which way is the better way to go. I know that counties have done it both ways. I know that if we went to buy everything right now up front ourselves, we'll probably spend in the neighborhood of $25,000 to buy everything. If the private individual owns the tools, they're going to be maintaining them better. They're going to keep an eye on them better. And that's why the county went this path when they did back in the 1995, I believe, when they went to that $275 stipend. Because there were so many tools that were getting lost, disappearing, that the cost of, they're constantly buying new tools. As soon as they went to that stipend, the mechanic providing his own tools, if he lost it, it's on him. Some of the tools wear out, some of it has lifetime warranty. So yes, once you have the tools, yeah, you're good with a lot of the different ratchets and sockets and everything. It takes some time to build up that amount, considering we do have a lot of specialty tools that are tools that we need because our trucks are so rusted up with that salt that goes down. Even a 1-year-old plow truck, after 1 year of driving that winter, they get really rusted up, and you need to make sure you have good tools and that you keep replacing them as needed. They wear out. What way's better, I don't know, and that's why I think you have some counties that are just buying everything and then they replace them as needed. Some counties, like what we've done, have paid the stipend. We do have our mechanic back here that came today, that he can maybe answer questions on what he's seen in his little time here, along with what tools he's needed to have already that he's since he's been here.
And let me just add real quick. It's true, and a bunch of companies have struggled with that. If you bring your own tools, you're going to be a little bit more cautious with them and whatnot. However, when the mechanic is a primary responsible person for those tools, I would deem it appropriate that they'd be held responsible. The tool's lost or whatever, okay, or something happens, like that aspect of it, well, you're responsible, it comes out of your pay. The reason I say that is a lot of companies now are going to shadowboxing not only their toolbox, but all their own inventory. If a tool is gone, you don't leave until that tool is found. Prime example, General Dynamics makes Gulfstream jets, $45 million jets. All their tools are shadowboxed. The first 2 weeks upon employment, you are required to shadowbox every tool in your own toolbox. At the end of the day, somebody comes around and inspects. That tool is missing. Nobody leaves until that tool is found. Because in the airplanes, they were getting found in the tail sections of airplanes. You get bound up in the cables and can cause a plane to go down. So it's a little bit more serious. But the whole point was they were having that same problem. You have issues where theft or missing or broken tools aren't being accounted for. So that way, if this tool is missing, you don't leave until it's found. If it's not found, it comes out of your pay. So being a little bit more responsible for the county's tools, I think, is appropriate. I'm not saying that we shouldn't compensate for private tools, but I think the argument more is how much.
Okay, let's move this on. Somebody have a recommendation in the form of a motion?
I'll make a motion that at this point we continue with the $275 a month.
Is there a second? No second? Okay. Somebody have another suggestion?
I will say that I would recommend that you at least continue with where you are right now until you come up with a plan, including maybe at budget time if you were to buy the other tools. Right now you have no tools, and you have an employee bringing private property with no compensation. And that's not part of the agreement for employment for them to bring that with them. That would be my recommendation until you look at it further.
I'll make a motion that we pay $275 a month until we come up with another solution.
Yeah, I think Tess has a very good point, and as long as nobody has a motion.
Well,
the only motion I would make would be for the county to purchase the tools the mechanic needs. And I'm not sure from the discussion whether we'd even have a second to that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well,
I can make that motion, but still, then we got a budget problem.
Yeah. But Teresa just moved again.
Yeah. And I think, realistically, I think I have to second that,
Okay.
and then we go from there.
Can I just bring up parliamentary procedure that we just had a motion for 275 that failed, and now another motion for 275 again?
I think it was a separate motion.
What's the difference?
Was, she said, until we come to a decision on what we're going
Yeah.
to do.
Okay, so having a deadline is the difference. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Comfortable?
Sure.
Okay. Any other discussion? It started today with a full head of hair, you know that?
I only had a 4-hour pain pill.
That's hurrying up.
Jack, there are pictures.
Sure. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Oh,
I'm in favor.
okay. You were an aye. Yeah. Okay.
I'll be opposed.
Abstaining.
Okay, carried. You're abstaining? Okay.
And I think this is something too to look at just for budget time too. Having that discussion as far as purchasing tools or doing something.
Right.
So we'll discuss it more then.
Good idea. Anything else, Tess?
No, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
Tess, is it called micromanagement?
Well, we need to talk about that because
Who was the no?
I was.
Oh, you were the no?
Yeah.
Oh,
And we had 1 abstain, so we have 2 in favor.
yeah, put me down as yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Here, I put that.
Action items. Approved claims, human service, and license center disbursements. All had a chance to review those.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the claims, human service, and disbursement.
Second.
I would just mention, did all of you notice the $1,200 turkey costume that was on there? I questioned it. Carol informed me that we got reimbursed from the city of Caledonia for their little celebration, but I'm like, who's wearing this? Yeah, but, okay.
You are.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, then we have approve the Board of Equalization minutes from 6/20/17.
Move approval.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed. Consent agenda. There's correspondence to Ashley Dress regarding appointment to the EDA Board and correspondence to payroll regarding various board action. approve the consent as one?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed. Discussion items. Commissioner reports and comments. Fred?
The only thing that I have is that on Friday, I went to La Crosse to the solid waste landfill meeting there, and I learned an awful lot that I hadn't known about that operation. I don't want to take time at this point to share a lot of it, but if you do get a chance to get there, call ahead, talk to somebody, and they'll make time to tell you what's going on there. And that is really a good thing to see. It's a good thing for us individually, I think, to know about. Believe it or not, end of comment.
No, okay. Thanks, Fred. Teresa?
I only had a Human Service Committee meeting yesterday, and I won't report on that at this time.
I have nothing to report at this time.
I just had one comment that just got brought up just now. I don't know if we've ever discussed, just to have on the record, board chair votes. I'll bring this up because I read in the paper or whatever where it'll say, you know, it went 4-1, 3-2, whatever. But technically the chair doesn't vote.
Right.
Or hasn't been voting. So I'm just saying, do we clarify, is it something we want the chair to be voting, or do you just want to vote in the event of a tie? If that be the case, then it should be, 3-1, be reported as such. Otherwise it makes it look like.
I did research that, and boards under 12, the chairman
I thought we
votes.
did this once, didn't we?
Well, yeah, but I guess my
And
point
should
is.
vote on everything.
Well, has the option if the board wants to follow those rules, we can follow the minimum rules. I'm saying if we want to do that, we should state it. And the only reason I say this is a lot of times we vote and Jack doesn't say yes or no. So then a lot of times if that be the case, not voting is a yes unless
Right.
saying no. Do we want to go that way, that it's just considered a yes unless the chair says no? Or I just want to make sure that's being reflected right, because technically Jack hasn't been saying one way or the other, but it's reported 4-1, and it's like, well.
Right.
But usually he speaks up and says no if he doesn't want to.
But that's what I'm saying. Are we
Yeah.
going to do it that way, that no?
I would
If the chair
prefer
doesn't
we
say
all
anything, it's
vote all
default to
times.
yes.
I think we
You
should all
think-
vote
I think
every
we should
time
all
too,
vote all
because
Okay,
he
that's-
does have the biggest district, actually.
That's
My logic on thinking that he should be voting all the time is that simply he represents a district.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
He needs to represent that district. The people of the district needs to know what he's doing as the
Okay.
representative.
I'm fine with that. I guess
So-
my nonverbal has been an understanding that it's yes, but
Yeah.
I
That's a
will,
good point
I will
to maybe
verbalize.
clarify it.
well, and that's the thing, because usually by not saying anything, it defaults to yes automatically. But under true Robert's Rules of Order, for the chairman votes in the event of a tie. Our board said, I don't know, 4 years ago, that the chair will vote on everything. So I just wanted to stay somewhat consistent so that
Yeah.
if somebody says, well, it says 4-1, but I was there,
Yeah.
Okay.
It
and
wasn't.
it wasn't, yeah. So
Yeah, that's fine.
just to clarify that, what we're doing.
Makes sense.
At home, when I don't say anything, it usually means no, but
You
But
get
there, it doesn't do any good anyway.
You don't get a choice at home.
No.
You don't get a vote.
it's me in a lot of trouble. Okay. And we discussed I'm sorry.
That's it?
That's it.
That's
And
it.
I was at the same meeting that Teresa was at, Human Services, and we'll have information at the next meeting concerning those issues. And we've already discussed road damage in Mound Prairie and closing public comment. Yes.
Try to be as brief as possible.
Thank you.
My name is Steve Hartwig, a 40-year resident of Money Creek Township. When these three boys were up here from zoning and the DNR, they failed to mention that tomorrow there's a meeting from 2 to 4 o'clock on the buffer law at the Criminal Justice Center. So I would encourage people to attend that. One of the provisions that they'll be talking about is a hardship waiver extension that can be sought by filing with the Soil Water SWCD by November 1st, and this a parcel-specific protection can be given to an individual until July 1st of next year. I'm going to go on thin ice here and say that there's a personality on the Soil Water SWCD who has a kind of a dubious background on enforcement, and when you guys decided that there's going to be local control of the enforcement, I'm hoping that the zoning department will have an audit component to see that the enforcement is being done. I thought it was a little ironic to rebuke the Department of Transportation for having laws that they don't enforce. The second point is about the Muir versus Wisconsin Supreme Court decision last week, in which there was a judgment involving the taking clause of the Fifth Amendment, and Justice Kennedy, who wrote the opinion for the majority, said that regulations that partly limit how a property owner uses his or her land or not necessarily require compensation from the state. Regulations do not always detract from land value. Indeed, such regulations often enhance that value. Courts must consider a number of factors, including the treatment of the land under state and local law, the physical characteristics of the land, and the prospective value of the regulated land. The government almost never says that you can't do anything with the property you own. It just looks at the environmental sensitive part and restricts your use of that piece. I think this has broad implications for what can transpire here in Houston County. I know that Representative Greg Davids oftentimes brings up the taking aspect, and I think that's probably might be mentioned tomorrow at the Bluff strip, or the buffer strip tomorrow, and I think this has been decided in favor of government units by the Supreme Court. So,
thank you. Yes, that's all right. Ryan, quickly.
Yeah, I would like to address the same issue a little bit. I have more stream per acre probably than anybody in this county. I own 50 acres, farmed it for 29 years, and I have a half a mile of stream on that. And that doesn't count the wigglies. That's if you do straight lines. So I've been in compliance for 29 years. It is not a hardship. We can grow things other than corn and soybeans in Houston County. And I was very concerned about the decision for local control, because based on this county's enforcement, local control means no control, no enforcement. That's what's happened with our zoning ordinance for a long time, and we're all aware of that. I don't need to go into that. Beyond that, the public waters are part of a trust of future generations. And this board has a fiduciary responsibility to protect that trust for future generations. That's been determined by numerous court decisions for many decades. You have a responsibility to protect the waters of this county. So enforcement needs to be absolute, and if you can't get it done locally, I'm all for local control, but local control in this county is not worked out for enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. And I, for one, will take the enforcement issue very, very seriously, and will be talking to the people involved forcibly about this issue. So appreciate your input. Anything else?
I move adjournment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.